In the middle of a blizzard, two little girls found a stranger collapsed in the snow-cold, silent, barely breathing. They had no idea. The man they just saved was a millionaire CEO lost in every way that mattered. What happened next would change all their lives forever. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from and stay with us through this unforgettable, heart-stirring story. The streets of Buffalo hissed under thick veils of snow, the kind that blanketed sound and made the world feel still, except for the cutting wind that swept down the avenues like a warning. Ethan Whitaker walked alone, his overcoat buttoned to the neck, collar upturned, but no amount of wool could soften the cold gnawing at his chest. He had a driver, of course, too, actually. But tonight, he waved them off. He needed the quiet, or maybe he needed the punishment. The sharp clack of his shoes on the frozen sidewalk faded into the hush of the storm. He passed shuttered storefronts and darkened windows, all aglow with faint reflections of Christmas lights. Every wreath and twinkling bulb seemed to mock him. Ethan had a penthouse that touched the sky, the kind of place people dreamt of. But lately, every time the elevator doors opened, he felt like a prisoner being delivered to his cell. The wind picked up, sharp as regret. Snow gathered in the creases of his suit pants, crusted on his eyelashes. He barely noticed. His thoughts were louder than the storm. Stockholder meetings, the foundation gala next month, the press inquiry he had ignored. But beneath those surfaced layers was a silence much older, a colder kind. The kind that whispered, "You built everything, and you still have nothing." He turned down a side street, past an old elementary school playground. The iron swings groaned in the wind. It was the same playground he used to sneak into after his third foster home kicked him out for stealing instant noodles. He hadn't thought of that in decades. The memory hit like a stray gust of snow. Before he could make sense of it, the dizziness swept in. His chest tightened. He staggered, reached out for a street lamp that wasn't there, and then everything went white. He fell hard, face first into the snow. Cold seeped through his coat, his shirt, straight to his skin. He could feel nothing, not his fingers, not his feet, not even the thudding panic that had driven him to walk alone in a storm. Only one clear thought floated up from the haze. Maybe this is what I deserve. Across the street, two small figures trudged through the white blur. Hazel and Harper Morgan, twin sisters just 6 years old, wore coats 2 sizes too big and rain boots lined with mismatched socks. Hazel held a paper bag with sandwiches. Harper carried a thermos of soup wrapped in a kitchen towel. They walked in rhythm, heads bowed against the wind, on their way to the clinic to visit their mother. Hazel stopped first. Her mittened hand tugged Harper's sleeve. "There's someone there," she whispered. Harper squinted through the flurry. "Is he sleeping?" They stood still for a beat. Harper clutched her sister's arm. "Maybe we should go around. Grandma says not to talk to strangers." Hazel didn't move. Something inside her pulled her forward. It wasn't bravery, not exactly. It was something gentler, a quiet certainty that if she were lying in the snow, she wouldn't want to be alone. She took a step, then another. The man didn't stir. Hazel knelt awkwardly, her knees disappearing into the snowbank, and placed her hand on his shoulder. "Sir?" she whispered. No answer. She leaned closer, her breath fogging in front of her lips. He was barely breathing. His lips were pale. His skin looked gray. Hazel fumbled with her backpack, pulling out a scratched-up flip phone with a unicorn sticker on the back. Grandma Betty had insisted it stay charged for emergencies. 911, she said aloud as she dialed. Her voice trembled, but she kept it steady. My name is Hazel Morgan. I'm 6. There's a man in the snow by the playground near Elm Street School. He won't wake up. Harper knelt beside her, wide-eyed. The snow swirled harder now, flakes clinging to Ethan's frozen lashes. Hazel tried brushing them off gently. She didn't know why. It just felt like the kind thing to do. The dispatcher told her help was on the way. The girls sat with him until they saw flashing lights bounce off the snowbanks. Harper squeezed Hazel's hand. Is he gonna die? She asked. Hazel looked at the man's face. She didn't know anything about him, but she knew what cold looked like. She knew what lonely looked like. And this man looked both. Not if we stay, she whispered. The paramedics didn't waste time with questions. They wrapped Ethan in a thermal blanket, lifted him into the ambulance. Hazel handed the EMT the paper bag with the sandwiches. In case he's hungry when he wakes up, she said. The EMT gave her a soft smile. That's very kind of you. As the ambulance drove off, Hazel stood quietly, her cheeks pink from the cold, her brows furrowed like someone much older. We found him, she said. Harper tilted her head. Yeah, Hazel nodded. I think he was supposed to be found. And under the storming sky, with snow falling like feathers from heaven, 2 little girls turned and walked back into the night. Their footprints the only evidence that kindness had passed this way. The first thing Ethan noticed was the silence. Not the kind he curated in his penthouse with soundproof windows and smart home tech, but a deeper, gentler kind one filled with the soft rustle of blankets, distant humming, and the faint squeak of rubber-soled shoes against linoleum. When his eyes fluttered open, he saw white walls, fluorescent lights, and the unmistakable sterility of a clinic room. The warmth cocooning him didn't come from the expensive sheets of his suite, but from something unfamiliar. Wool blankets. Human concern. A nurse leaned over him, clipboard in hand. She smiled, but there was tiredness in her eyes, the kind that came from long nights and short staff. Mr. Whitaker, you gave us quite a scare, she said gently. You collapsed near the old school playground. 2 little girls found you. He blinked, trying to sit up. Girls? She nodded. 6 years old. Called 911 themselves. Stayed with you until the ambulance arrived. You wouldn't be here if they hadn't. Ethan turned his gaze toward the window, where frost feathered the glass. 2 little girls. Why would anyone stop? Especially for a man in a suit, half buried in snow, barely breathing. In his world, people passed by even when you begged for help. The nurse seemed to read the confusion on his face. They didn't even know your name. You didn't have ID on you. I left everything behind, he murmured. Well, she said with a smile, someone left everything to find you. Later that afternoon, an older woman walked into the room, wrapped in a thick coat with a scarf tied tight under her chin. Her hair was white, but her eyes were sharp as cut glass. Betty Morgan introduced herself with a cautious nod. Grandma to Hazel and Harper, the girls who found you. Ethan studied her. There was no warmth in her tone, no smile, just a polite suspicion. Thank you, he said, genuinely. They saved my life. Betty didn't soften. They were raised to help, but that doesn't mean we welcome strangers into our lives. I understand. I'm not here to disrupt anything. I just wanted to say thank you. Her gaze didn't waver. Are you a father? He hesitated. No. Then maybe you won't understand why I'm careful. She turned to leave, but paused. They're at the clinic with their mom. Claire. The name caught in Ethan's chest like a breath held too long. Is she all right? Betty exhaled slowly. Coma. Been weeks now. The girls still talk to her like she's awake. It helps them cope. Ethan asked if he could meet them. Betty hesitated but nodded once. Keep it short. He followed her down a dim hallway to a modest room with chipped paint and a faint scent of antiseptic. Two small girls sat beside a hospital bed, their legs swinging off the edge of plastic chairs. One had a yellow headband over tangled curls. The other wore bright purple socks and no shoes. They looked up when the door opened. Hazel was first to smile. "You're the snowman?" Harper added. "The one with the really cold face." Ethan almost laughed. Their eyes were bright, full of that unfiltered innocence he hadn't seen in decades. "That's me," he said, voice hoarse. "Thank you for stopping. You didn't have to." Hazel shrugged. "Grandma says we help, even big people. Most people wouldn't. That's what Grandma says too. But we're not most people." Ethan turned to look at Claire. Her face was pale, her lips dry. But there was something familiar about her, a warmth he couldn't place. The room was small, but full of signs of love. A get-well card drawn in crayon, a crocheted blanket, a snow globe sitting on the nightstand. These children had next to nothing, but they gave what little they had freely. Flashbacks returned in fragments. His own childhood, cold shelters, thin blankets, shared bunk beds. He remembered stealing peanut butter packets from school just to have something for dinner. No one ever noticed. No one ever stopped. Until now. These girls had. Later that evening, Ethan sat in the visitor's lounge, hands clasped tight. The question wouldn't leave him. Why did they stop? He had money, power, the kind of influence that made men step aside in silence. But he hadn't had kindness in years. And now 2 little strangers had wrapped him in it like a scarf around a frozen neck. Back at his penthouse, he would have drifted into sleep staring at skyline glass, hearing nothing but the hum of central air. But here, in this modest clinic, warmth came not from marble floors or heated tiles, but from cocoa-stained drawings taped to the wall. Before he left, Hazel approached him again. "Do you feel better now?" Ethan knelt, uncertain. "Yeah, thanks to you." She leaned in and whispered, "It's okay to be cold sometimes, but not forever." He didn't know what to say. So he nodded. And something deep inside him, a place long frozen over, began to thaw. The next morning, Ethan stood outside the Morgans building, clutching a grocery bag that cost less than his watch band. His driver had dropped him off 3 blocks away. He didn't want to show up in a black SUV that screamed wealth. The walk had chilled his hands, but it calmed his nerves. Still, as he stared at the chipped door and the rusting railing, doubt crept in. He was crossing into a world that felt galaxies apart from his own. Betty opened the door, apron on, flour on her hands. She looked him up and down, then at the bag. "You lost or just persistent?" "Maybe both," Ethan replied, offering a hesitant smile. "I brought dinner, chicken stew, and some rolls." Betty sighed. "All right, but if the girls hate it, you're taking the blame." The inside of their apartment was small, a bit cramped, but filled with warmth. Mismatched chairs, paper snowflakes hanging from string, the smell of something sweet baking in the oven. Hazel and Harper looked up from their coloring books, brightening when they saw him. "Snowman," Hazel beamed. "You came back." Harper studied the bag. "Is that food?" "It is," Ethan said, setting it down. "But I didn't cook it, just bought it." "Then you owe us cookies," Harper declared. "That's the deal." Ethan chuckled, surprised by how easily they drew him in. As they sat at the wobbly kitchen table, the twins eagerly ladled stew into chipped bowls. Harper did a happy wiggle after her first bite. "This has potatoes," she cried. "Real ones." Ethan watched them eat like it was Christmas morning. The simple joy of warm food, the comfort of being safe, he hadn't known what it looked like until now. After dinner, Harper pulled out a tattered fairy tale book, the spine barely holding together. "Can you read this?" she asked. "Sure," Ethan said, sitting cross-legged on the rug. Hazel curled beside him. Harper perched on his other side. He started reading, doing voices the best he could. A squeaky prince, a growly dragon. Hazel giggled uncontrollably. Harper corrected him every time he missed a word. "You skipped a page," she scolded. "I did?" "Yep. The queen has to say the thing about soup. That's her favorite line." Betty watched from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. Her eyes didn't soften, but they held a quiet curiosity. Later, when the girls were brushing their teeth, she cornered Ethan by the hallway. "They're getting attached," she said bluntly. "Don't make promises you can't keep." Ethan nodded slowly. "I haven't made any. I'm just here." "People like you don't usually stay," she muttered. "People like me," Ethan echoed quietly. "Used to believe that too." That night, back in his penthouse, Ethan stared at his phone. He hadn't checked emails in hours. The city glittered below him, soulless and silent. For the first time in years, he wasn't chasing the next deal or dodging a crisis. He was remembering. He called his assistant, Mark. "Can you look into the Morgans?" Claire Morgan, 2 kids. Medical records, school status, anything public. Mark didn't ask questions, just said, "Sure thing, boss." An hour later, Ethan sat staring at his tablet. Claire Morgan, 39, former waitress. Medical file listed her as comatose due to complications from pneumonia. Listed next of kin, Elizabeth Morgan. Children, Hazel and Harper Morgan. And then he saw the emergency contact form. A name scrawled in faded ink. "Claire Morgan," he whispered. The name unlocked something. A memory burst through. A diner on a snowy night, 2 decades ago. A shivering teenage Ethan, curled under a broken awning, trying to stay invisible. A girl with bright eyes and a patchy coat had walked out with a styrofoam cup and a sandwich wrapped in a napkin. "Here," she had said. "It's not much, but it's warm." She'd wrapped her own coat around him, ignoring his protests. "Don't be stupid. It's freezing." He hadn't remembered her name then. Now he did. Claire Morgan had saved him once, with nothing to gain. No one else ever had. The next day, Ethan returned to the clinic. He waited until Betty was out picking up medicine. Inside Claire's room, he stood alone. The girls were at school. The room was still. He looked at Claire's sleeping face. Time had etched soft lines there. Her hair was thinner, but it was her. On the windowsill was a child's drawing. 3 figures, hand in hand. "Mom, Hazel, Harper," it said, and a 4th stick figure floating beside them. A question mark hovered over its head. Ethan touched the glass. The 4th figure felt like him, always outside, always unknown, but now, maybe he could step in. He sat beside Claire, took her hand gently. "You gave me warmth when I had nothing," he whispered. "I didn't deserve it then, but maybe I can earn it now." The early morning light bled gently through the blinds of the small clinic room. Claire's machines beeped steadily, a mechanical lullaby in an otherwise quiet world. Ethan sat beside her again, hair slightly tousled, tie loosened, a cup of hospital coffee untouched in his hand. He'd been there most of the night. Not pacing, not restless, just still. Listening to the soft hum of life around Claire, watching for any flicker of movement. At sunrise, Betty entered the room carrying a bag of groceries. Her eyebrows arched when she saw him. "You planning on renting that chair, Mr. Whitaker?" He turned toward her slowly, eyes heavy but clear. I knew her. Claire. Betty set the bag down with more force than necessary. "What do you mean, you knew her?" He leaned forward, rubbing his hands together as if warming a confession. 22 years ago, I was a nobody, sleeping behind diners, stealing packets of saltines just to feel full. One night, it was freezing. I was curled under an awning outside Carmine's diner, and Claire, she worked there. She gave me her coat and half a sandwich. No judgment, no pity, just kindness. Betty sat, the tension in her shoulders slowly easing. She never mentioned it, but that sounds like Claire. Ethan smiled faintly. I didn't remember her name that night, just her voice, her warmth. I didn't even say thank you. Betty folded her arms. You think this is fate? I think it's a second chance. There was a long silence between them. Then Betty sighed. We're proud people, Mr. Whitaker. We've done without handouts all our lives. So have I, he said gently. But pride doesn't keep the heat on. Later that afternoon, Ethan returned to the Morgans' apartment with a bag of groceries, some school supplies, and a new space heater. Hazel opened the door with wide eyes. You came back, she chirped, hugging his leg. Harper peered over her sister's shoulder. Did you bring cookies? No, Ethan said with mock seriousness. But I brought math flashcards. Both girls groaned in unison. That evening, as they sat cross-legged on the carpet, Ethan attempted to help with homework. He struggled through basic multiplication, holding up flashcards with more confusion than confidence. 4 times 6 is 24, he guessed. Harper rolled her eyes dramatically. You need tutoring too. Hazel giggled. It's okay. You can be the student. We'll be the teachers. Ethan let out a laugh, a real, unguarded laugh that echoed off the worn walls. It startled even him. After dinner, Betty served hot cocoa in mismatched mugs. Ethan sat beside the girls on the couch. Hazel leaned her head against his arm. Harper tucked her feet under his knee. Grandma says cocoa makes your heart warmer, Hazel whispered. Ethan looked into his cup. Then this must be working. He turned to Betty. I want to help. Medical bills, school stuff. I can do more. Betty hesitated, her hands curled around her cup. You already helped. You came back. Ethan leaned forward. That's not enough. He met Claire's doctor the next day, paid off the outstanding bills, hired a home health aide, installed a second heater in the girls' room. None of it flashy, just practical things, needed things. The girls started drawing pictures again. One evening, Hazel presented Ethan with a crayon masterpiece. It showed 4 stick figures. Mom, Hazel, Harper, and you. Underneath it read, Our team. Ethan stared at it for a long time before placing it gently in his briefcase. That night, while Claire slept, Ethan sat beside her again. He pulled the old coat from the closet, gently folded it over his lap. You gave me warmth when the world was cold, he whispered. And you never asked for anything. You never needed to. But now, I do. His voice cracked as he continued. I need to do this. For you. For them. For the man I was. And the one I'm trying to become. The room was quiet, save for the soft rhythm of Claire's breathing and the snow tapping gently against the window. It felt, for the first time in years, like Ethan was exactly where he was supposed to be. The snow continued to fall in Buffalo, thick and soft, like the quiet that now wrapped around Ethan Whitaker's heart. Each morning, he found himself waking earlier, sometimes even before the sun, and making his way to the Morgans' small apartment, as if drawn by a force he couldn't name. Something in him had shifted, or perhaps something buried long ago was finally stirring. Claire had started showing small signs of improvement. It began with a twitch of her fingers one morning, while Hazel was brushing her mother's hand with her tiny palm. Later that day, she took a deeper breath. The doctor didn't promise miracles, but he did say it was hopeful. Ethan spent hours sitting at Claire's bedside, sometimes reading aloud the girl's favorite stories, his voice unsure, but growing steadier with each page. One night, when he was alone with her, he leaned closer and spoke softly. "You saved me once, Claire. You probably don't remember that night. You probably don't remember me. But I do. I remember how warm your coat felt, how kind your voice was, and I remember how I never said, 'Thank you.'" The beeping of the monitor answered him, a metronome of silence. The next day, Hazel and Harper dragged Ethan out into the snow-covered yard behind their building. "We're building Ethan Jr.," Harper announced, "because he's tall and serious too." Ethan laughed. His hands fumbled with the snowballs, his scarf slipping down, his coat too tailored for snowplay. Hazel squealed when he fell backward into a drift. Harper pelted him with a snowball. He threw one back, badly. They laughed until their cheeks flushed red and their mittens were soaked. Later that evening, Ethan stayed for dinner. Betty made chicken and dumplings. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, filling, familiar. Afterward, he helped Hazel with her spelling. She perched on his knee, pointing to each word as he pronounced it wrong on purpose just to hear her giggle. When Harper yawned and climbed onto the couch with her sketchbook, Ethan noticed her drawing carefully, a house with 4 stick figures, all smiling. In shaky block letters beneath it, she wrote, "Me, Hazel, Mommy, and Mr. E." He felt his throat tighten. That night, Betty pulled him aside as she rinsed dishes. "You paid Claire's hospital bills, didn't you?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. They were overdue. She deserved better than worrying from a hospital bed. Betty dried her hands slowly. "You think money fixes everything?" "No," Ethan said, voice low. "But maybe it buys a chance to fix what we can." Betty studied him a long moment, then quietly, "You remind me of someone who used to come around here." Cold eyes, heavy wallet, empty heart. "You don't look like him anymore." He nodded, unsure if it was praise or warning. A few days later, Ethan took the girls to the bookstore. It was the first time he'd willingly entered one since college. Hazel picked out a book about outer space. Harper chose one with unicorns and maps. They ate hot chocolate afterward at a diner down the street. The twins talked over each other, laughing and correcting one another with the comfortable rhythm of siblings who had only ever had each other. Harper suddenly grew quiet. She stirred her whipped cream with her spoon, eyes cast down. "Are you going to be here next Christmas?" she asked. The question hit Ethan like a freight train. He set down his mug. "Do you want me to be?" Hazel nodded. Harper just stared. "Only if you'll let me," he said. "I don't want to be another person who walks away." Harper reached across the table and slipped her tiny hand into his. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was firm. Back at the office, things had changed. Ethan had started turning down meetings. He didn't bark orders anymore. His assistant, Jared, noticed. So did the board. The phones kept ringing, but he didn't answer every time. The deals didn't excite him the way they used to. One afternoon, Jared approached him in the hallway. "Sir, there's some talk among the board about your priorities." Ethan looked out the window. Snowflakes drifted down like a slow confession. "Let them talk," he said. They didn't wake up in the snow. He was no longer the man who once saw the city only in terms of square footage and profit margins. The world looked different now. Softer, messier, more real. And it all started with a pair of tiny mittened hands reaching through a snowstorm. Ethan walked into the girls' room that night to tuck them in. Hazel was already snoring. Harper stirred as he pulled the blanket over her. "Good night, sweetheart," he whispered. Harper mumbled in her sleep, "Night." Mr. E. Ethan turned off the light and stood in the doorway for a long time. Watching, breathing, learning, perhaps for the first time, what it meant to be home. Buffalo's blizzard softened into a steady hush of falling snow. But inside Ethan Whitaker's world, storms continued to brew. The Morgan's building, though warmer now thanks to the new heating system he installed, still creaked with every gust of wind. In the small kitchen, Hazel and Harper huddled on stools watching toast pop up from a worn-out toaster, while Ethan clumsily scrambled eggs beside them. "Too much pepper," Harper said, scrunching her nose. "It's a bold culinary decision," Ethan replied, trying not to smile. Claire had begun to speak again. Not much. A few strained sentences at first, the muscles around her mouth still sluggish. But the first word she said wasn't anyone's name. It was simply, "home." That word shook Ethan more than anything. He spent his life building skyscrapers, buying penthouses, reshaping skylines. But none of those places had ever felt like home. When he showed Claire the new house, nestled near the hospital with a fenced yard and warm yellow shutters, she stared in silence for a long while. Then she whispered, "Is this really for us?" "For all of you," Ethan said. "I just put it on paper. You made it real." Moving day was chaotic. Betty barked orders with a surprising level of command. The girls squealed when they saw their shared bedroom with matching bunk beds and a tiny reading nook Ethan built himself, with the help of 3 YouTube tutorials and 2 Band-Aids. Claire sat by the window, wrapped in a thick blanket, her eyes bright with disbelief. "You don't have to do all this, Ethan." "I know," he said, "but I want to." The moment was interrupted by the flash of a camera outside. Paparazzi. Ethan rushed to the front door just as 2 reporters tried to approach the porch. One of them called out, "Mr. Whitaker, is it true you've been living with a single mother and her kids?" Harper screamed from behind him, covering her eyes as the flashes burst like lightning. Hazel clung to Claire's legs, trembling. Ethan stepped forward, shielding them. "This is private property. You need to leave, now." They didn't. Not immediately. But when a police cruiser pulled up called quietly by Betty with impressive speed, the reporters scattered. That night, Claire sat beside Ethan on the porch. "Your world is following you here," she said quietly. "Then maybe it's time I stop running from it," he replied. Back at his corporate office, the boardroom was on fire, figuratively speaking. Jared, his assistant, called in a hushed panic. "The board's demanding an emergency meeting. They want to know if you're stepping down or just losing your mind." Ethan looked at Hazel and Harper making snow angels in the backyard. "Tell them I'll be there tomorrow," he said. "I owe them answers." That night, Betty slipped on the front steps while taking out the trash. Ethan heard her cry out and ran faster than he thought he could. She'd twisted her ankle badly. Claire panicked. The girls started crying. Ethan stayed calm. "I'll take care of this," he said, and he did. He called the nurse, arranged for physical therapy, moved furniture to make space for Betty downstairs. As he helped Betty into her recliner, she held his hand for an extra second. "I used to think you were just a rich boy playing hero," she said. "Now I think maybe you were the one needing rescue." Ethan didn't know what to say. Later that evening, he found Harper asleep in the living room, curled up beside a drawing she'd made. In the picture, there were 5 figures: 2 little girls, a woman with a red scarf, an old lady with glasses, and a man in a suit. Over the top, in wobbly marker, she'd written, "Our family." Ethan traced the word family with his thumb. For the first time in years, he felt like he was in one, not just helping one. The snow outside thickened again that night. But inside, the fire burned steady. A different kind of warmth. One he hadn't known he'd been missing. The boardroom was just as Ethan remembered it. Sleek, sterile, polished to a mirror shine. The glass walls offered a breathtaking view of Buffalo's skyline. But today, it all felt like a facade. The city looked as distant as he had once been from the world around him. He stood alone at the head of the long mahogany table, watching the board members file in, each one dressed in crisp suits and guarded expressions. "Mr. Whitaker," one of the senior partners said, adjusting his tie with a raised brow. "You called this meeting. We're assuming it's urgent?" Ethan nodded, his voice steady. "It is." He took a breath. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about quarterly reports or profit margins. He was thinking about snow-covered cheeks, burnt pancakes, and the way Hazel held her drawing like it was treasure. "I've spent most of my life building towers for people I'll never meet," he began, his voice low but unwavering. "Glass and steel, square footage and market value. And then one morning, I woke up in the snow, alone. Except, I wasn't." Silence filled the room. Some leaned forward, others exchanged puzzled glances. "I was found by 2 6-year-old girls," he continued. "Hazel and Harper. They didn't know who I was. They didn't care. They just saw someone who needed help, and they gave it without question." He paused, letting the words settle. "I used to think success meant owning the tallest building. Now I know it means being someone a child can run to, someone who stays. That kind of legacy." He looked each board member in the eye. "You can't buy it. You have to build it." The room remained frozen in place, as if no one dared move and miss what was coming next. "I'm stepping down as CEO," Ethan said. "Effective immediately." Gasps broke the silence. Murmurs flared around the table like wind through dry grass. "You're what?" one man blurted. "You've built this company from the ground up." Ethan raised a hand gently. "And now it's time I build something else." There was no anger in his tone, only peace. That afternoon, Ethan signed the final documents in his penthouse office, the city still glittering outside like a dream he no longer needed. He sold the penthouse to a charity that turned luxury spaces into shelters. He wired the funds to a brand new nonprofit, the Claire Morgan Foundation, aimed at supporting single parents, children in crisis, and families on the edge of falling apart. Next, he found a small, struggling construction company on the East Side. One with potential, heart, and most importantly, people who knew what it meant to build homes, not just houses. He bought it outright and brought the keys to Claire. She was sitting on the porch of their new home, a blanket wrapped around her legs, still gaining strength but smiling more each day. "What's this?" she asked as he placed the envelope in her lap. "A job offer," he said. You helped me build a life when I had nothing. Let me return the favor." Claire opened it, eyes scanning the letter inside. Then she looked up, surprised. "Consultant?" "Think of it as co-architect of second chances," Ethan said, half grinning. She laughed, shook her head, and placed the envelope beside her. "You're impossible. Just persistent," he said. That night, the school gym buzzed with warmth and the smell of cocoa and construction paper. Parents and guardians lined the fold-out chairs. Ethan sat near the front, Harper waving excitedly from behind the curtain. Hazel whispered her lines into her sister's ear like a coach on the sidelines. When the curtain rose, the Christmas pageant unfolded with the usual chaos and charm-forgotten lines. 2 loud microphones, a kid dressed as a reindeer sneezing mid-song. Then came the angels. Harper stepped forward in her white robe and sparkly wings, hands clasped. She was the smallest angel, but her voice carried. "Some angels wear suits," she said clearly, eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Ethan. The room went still. Ethan felt a knot rise in his throat. He looked at Claire beside him, her hand sliding gently into his. They didn't need to say anything. The squeeze of her fingers was enough. After the play, the girls burst through the crowd and wrapped Ethan in a fierce hug. "You looked like you were gonna cry," Hazel said, grinning. "Maybe I did a little," Ethan admitted. Harper tugged at his coat. "So, what are we now?" Ethan knelt, eye level with her, the twinkling lights of the stage reflected in her eyes. "We're a family, Harper," he said softly. "A new kind I never knew I needed." She beamed, and Hazel threw her arms around them both. Claire leaned down, wrapping them in a circle. Even Betty, standing nearby with her cane, shook her head with a smile. "Took you long enough," she murmured. For the first time in a very long while, Ethan felt like he wasn't falling anymore. He was home. The scent of scorched batter and cinnamon hung thick in the air, curling through the hallways of the Morgan household like smoke trailing from a chimney. Ethan stood in the kitchen, squinting into the pan as blackened edges curled upward from what was once pancake batter. He poked it with a spatula and sighed. "I swear the recipe said medium heat." From behind him came Hazel's giggle, light and unfiltered. "You mean it said medium smoke?" Claire leaned against the doorframe in a sweater too big for her frame, arms folded, smiling with a mix of affection and amusement. "Maybe pancakes aren't your strong suit." Ethan turned toward her, mock scandalized. "I'm a developer, not a diner cook." Laughter erupted. Harper, still in her snowman pajamas and one sock half off, skipped into the room holding a bottle of syrup like it was a trophy. "It's okay. We'll eat them anyway. Christmas rules." Betty supervised from her place near the window, wrapped in a thick robe with a fleece blanket over her lap. Her sharp eyes missed nothing. "Don't forget to scrape the burnt bits before they mistake it for chocolate." The kitchen had never felt so full. Plates clattered, orange juice was spilled, syrup found its way onto elbows and countertops. And still, Ethan couldn't stop smiling. It was messy, imperfect, a little chaotic, but it was alive. Real. After breakfast, they gathered in the modest living room around a slightly lopsided Christmas tree. The branches drooped under handmade ornaments and mismatched lights that blinked at different rhythms. But to Ethan, it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. The twins handed him a package wrapped in newspaper comics and a ribbon that looked like it had been reused at least once. "Open it," Harper urged, bouncing on her toes. Ethan peeled back the wrapping carefully. What he found inside stilled him. It was a framed collage, Hazel's original drawing of him lying in the snow was at the center, her crayon strokes crude but hauntingly tender. Around it were photographs. Ethan in a hospital bed, with a dazed but grateful smile. Hazel and Harper curled beside him asleep. Claire holding his hand in the clinic. And one final image taken just a few days earlier of all of them bundled in winter coats, standing in front of their new house, smiling like they'd done it 1,000 times before. Across the bottom, scrawled in childlike handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for coming back." Ethan stared at the frame, unable to speak. The lump in his throat refused to budge. His fingers clutched it like it was a lifeline, something solid to hold on to in the flood of emotion. Betty, watching him quietly from her chair, patted his knee. Her voice was low, raspy with age and something softer. "I thought we were broken," she said. "But maybe we were just waiting to be whole." He turned to her slowly, meeting her gaze. No words came, but none were needed. He simply nodded, his eyes glistening, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. Later that morning, Claire slipped on her coat and scarf, looping it gently around her neck. She glanced at Ethan. "Walk with me?" He grabbed his jacket, and they stepped outside. The snow had picked up again, gentle flakes drifting down like whispers from the sky. The streets were hushed, blanketed in white, muffling the world into a calm serenity. They walked through the park in silence, boots crunching beneath them. Children's footprints danced alongside sled tracks, but most of the world was still tucked inside, waiting for presents and cocoa. Claire pointed ahead. "That's where Hazel said she found you. Just there." Ethan stopped. Slowly he knelt in the snow and pressed his gloved hand to the cold earth. His eyes didn't leave the spot. "Right here," he whispered. "This is where I woke up. Not just my heart. Everything." Claire didn't respond. She simply reached down and took his hand in hers. Behind them, Harper and Hazel came running, scarves trailing, boots kicking up tufts of snow as they laughed and shouted for them to wait up. Ethan stood and opened his arms, catching them both in a clumsy, giggling spin. Their laughter echoed through the stillness, cutting through the quiet with something louder than sound joy. Betty caught up a moment later, bundled like a snowball, and chuckled as she approached. The 5 of them stood there, 3 generations, none connected by blood, but all stitched together by something deeper. Ethan looked around at them. Claire's steady eyes, Betty's worn strength, Hazel's gleam of wonder, Harper's fearless joy. He took a slow breath, one that felt like it filled him all the way to the bones. This was home. He looked down at the twins, then over at Claire. "You all found me in the snow," he said quietly, voice cracking around the edges. "But you didn't just save my life. You gave it back to me." Claire squeezed his hand. Her answer was soft, certain. "Welcome home, Ethan." And for the first time in his life, he believed it. Ethan's journey reminds us that even in life's coldest moments, compassion can spark a warmth that truly transforms everything. What part of his story resonated most deeply with you? Have you ever experienced a second chance that changed your path? Share your reflections in the comments below. Your insights could inspire someone else. If this story touched your heart, please give us a thumbs up. Share it with a friend who might need to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more uplifting tales of resilience and hope. We're building a community here, and we'd love for you to be a part of it. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.